what do you mean this medicine has been around for 3,000 years? You can treat everything, right? That sounds too good to be true. Chinese medicine really believe that you as a human can rebalance and therefore you can heal.
So you could tell me based on my tongue what I would be struggling with.
Everyone deserves their individualized approach, especially something as tricky as depression and anxiety. You're going to go from, I am purposely isolating myself from the trauma to I'm now actually feeling my trauma.
It's building resilience in the body.
Anxiety is a symptom. It's not the root cause. People who are deeply anxious, they have digestive issues for sure.
They neglect the gut.
Each organ is associated with a particular emotion. If you subjectively feel you have these symptoms, you have these symptoms. You as a patient are the best person to know about your health.
Hello everyone to today's episode of Real, Raw and Authentic. I am again in Los Angeles today with Jiaming Zhu. She is a Chinese medicine practitioner and today I'm going to talk to her about her expertise, particularly around mental health. So if you're struggling physically or mentally, maybe with anxiety, depression, or unresolved trauma, this episode is for you. Jiaming, nice to have you. Thank you for being on my podcast today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Before we dive into your expertise, I'm more curious also about your personal story. What brought you into Chinese medicine?
There are actually two reasons. The official story is my father is a really famous Chinese medicine practitioner, doctor in China. He is legendary. So I grew up in our family clinic. So I am actually second generation Chinese medicine practitioner. But then the unofficial story is because of anger. So I have been a health economist for a decade, working for some of the most famous economists and government in the world, really shaping a country's longevity policy concerning pension, health, how do we not die, everything concerning the age of people above the age of 55. And I remember one day, I think this was after I came back from Singapore running one of the world's largest data think tank on longevity. I noticed there were all these gua sha tools or Chinese medicine marketing-like items on the internet. And I got really angry because they were not headed by practitioners, they were not licensed, or they were not attributing to our culture and most importantly, the expertise, the centuries of, wisdom there. So I got really mad. And I remember talking to a friend of mine, Jesse Israel, about this years later. And he was like, you have no excuse to be mad. You're not part of the industry. So you don't get to be mad. If you're not taking the space, someone is going to take the space. So if you think this story is not told the right way, then you'd better come up with your own story. So that's when it clicked with me. It's because of anger. I was like, okay, that's all. That's it. I guess I'm not retiring as an economist. I'm going to retrain and basically be a Chinese medicine practitioner. And that took 4 years. So here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. How does your work look like?
You mean nowadays? So I would say that I see patients 90% of the time virtually. I actually have patients from the Netherlands also. And instead of acupuncture, which a lot of my colleagues do, I am licensed in that, but I don't perform acupuncture. I think there are so many acupuncturists who are outstanding. My family's tradition is in customized herbal formulation, which means one patient, one formula. And so usually I see patients online from all over the world, and 10% of the time I would see patients in person. That's only limited to patients in LA. And most of the time, I would say like 80% of the time, I work with patients who not only have chronic physical conditions, they have chronic mental challenges as well. Whether it's depression or anxiety, it's usually when they have been either on SSRIs for a decade, they are no longer responding to it, or they come with a bunch of other side effects after, or they just don't respond to it, full stop. So it's a lot of mental challenges, not only about inability to focus, depression, anxiety, ADHD, many cases in adolescence as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
How does, for someone who's never heard about Chinese medicine, how is that different to, let's say, the classical approach of treating someone?
So, my dad has this classic story of how we're different from Western medicine. I think Western medicine, as we all know, like, it hasn't been around for that long, right? It's based on anatomy. Anatomy is a person who is already dead. It's based on what you can see on the body. But as someone who has, anybody who has chronic condition that is mental or physical, they will tell you that they have spent years going to the doctors trying to get a scan, trying to test the blood and find out what's really happening, but nothing shows. And until one day it shows, whether it's cancer or something else, it's too late. As a health economist, I know from the data end, it takes a long time for these issues to really show up on your blood work. So does that mean you were being paranoid the years before, that you were simply not sick? Of course not. So our approach in Chinese medicine is never about, I have to see it in the blood work. It's actually not so different from how in economics we collect the data. It's all about, if you subjectively feel you have these symptoms, you have these symptoms. In fact, this is in health economics, how you collect health data. It's about you as a patient are the best person to know about your health. And that is a fundamentally different approach. So in a way that we're not basing things on anatomy, on what you can see. That is relevant, of course, but it's more on you as an individual, as a evolving organism, how your health should work for you. So it's a very different approach.
Oh, that's interesting. So let's say I come to you and I'm just trying to think of the audience in my community. Let's say what they're dealing with. Most of the time, I think the most severe thing is depression or anxiety that shows mentally. But physically, it comes with unexplained pain. A lot of times, let's say that aching lower back pain, the neck pain, that heaviness, or with anxiety comes that pressure a lot of times around the chest or gut issues. Every now and then there's a bunch of things. But how would you approach this?
It's really interesting you mentioned that. I will use two real case to examine that. As you probably know, Chinese medicine is one of the oldest medicine. I believe it is the oldest that really links the mental with the physical. So when I look at a depression patients, it is very rare for me to examine a depression patient and find there's no physical symptoms whatsoever, right? So when someone is depressed, it's very important to understand what is really the root cause that leads to their depression. In addition to that, what are their really physical health symptoms, right? There was this patient of mine who is really a brilliant musician, and he came to me because he suffered debilitating, strange body pain that would basically make him bedridden, and he's very young. And long story short, I found he is completely healed now. I actually discharged him. I famously discharge patients all the time when they're healed because I'm like, bye, I love you, but we don't need to see each other anymore. Because he was really going through a lot of identity crisis and depression and frustration with the fact that he is part of the LGBTQ community, but he was from a very conservative community. And although he had a lot of success, he was unable to reckon with that. Every day he thinks the worst thing is just going to happen. He doesn't deserve anything that's positive or good. And in Chinese medicine, it's interesting. When you're deeply frustrated, when you're fearful, that will attack you in the liver and kidney channel. And liver and kidney channel are really responsible for back pain. Back and hip, even for men around the genitals. So he was getting a lot of back pain that was so sharp that attacks him out of nowhere. He often was having a lot of gut issues because when you have a lot of anger, you have repressed anger in particular, it really impacts how you digest. So the digestion was all over the place. He thought he couldn't eat gluten, he couldn't eat sugar because that would just be crazy. He can eat everything now. It's not a problem. But at the time, because he was having all this fear and he kept it all in himself, thinking he was undeserving of love, of growth in life, it attacked him directly on what we call the liver channel and also the kidney channel, which is really surrounding the pelvis, low back pain area. So he was having attacks like that, and also like pressure on the genitals. So he was fine after the treatment, and I don't need to see him anymore.
That's incredible. How would you approach this in your work? Is it because it's very mental also, the way of like worst case scenario thinking, I'm unworthy of whatever I'm receiving here, it's all gonna maybe fall apart. I think a lot of people can relate to it. How is Chinese medicine approaching this?
So for each patient is a little bit different. I think using him as an example, the most important thing first off was I had to make sure as a human being, you have to function perfectly. Better is about your gut health, better is about your sleep. If you were feeling that every day you were just going to crash physically, because especially physically, you were having all those symptoms, then you become convinced you're incurable. That's just how it's going to be. So the first step we took was to basically stabilize all his symptoms. He was able to stand on his own feet. He was able to go back to the gym. He was able to go swimming. And my personal approach was that at the time we were doing monthly follow-up. So each time I see him, I will let him tell me what he thinks, what has happened with the symptom, how he feels about himself physically, how he feels about himself, and what's happening to him like mentally. And he was the one who was telling me about all the progress. Now, of course, in the early days, a patient would be like, well, this is just sheer luck, right? This time I'm fine. Maybe tomorrow I would just crash. But then after like 2 months and 3 months, you're still like this throughout the season. He went hiking and he was totally fine. Before, he wouldn't even think about hiking.
Wow.
He went and he moved on with his partner. They're getting married, where before he was so just reluctant because he felt that he couldn't get on with his life. So, it brings me a lot of gratification to hear that from a patient. And based on their symptoms, I change the formulation every single time. This is why it's completely customized.
So formulation means there's also something they take?
Yeah, so herbal formulation. So my father and I co-write each patient's herbal formulation based on my consultation notes. That is based on 1 hour of consultation they do with me, and everyone will take their individually prescribed, customized formulation. So it's not like depression, go to formula A. It's not like that at all. It's like I have to write every single person's. This is really historically the elitist form of Chinese medicine, is also the most time consuming, but is hugely effective because everyone deserves their individualized approach, especially something as tricky, I would say, as depression and anxiety and even ADHD is not exactly, it's totally different from the Western medicine approach, which is like, depression, take this SSRI, take Zoloft, or take something else. Ultimately, the Chinese medicine approach is to prepare your body, whether it's like gut health or your body's ability to recover, or even your ability to gain muscle as easily as that, so strong that you will be mentally resilient. So it's very rare that I would, it doesn't work like SSRI, where you will almost like become short-sighted. You have blurry vision. You're like, I'm just less triggered by this because the trigger doesn't seem to be so scary anymore, as some people who like to describe how SSRI works. In this approach, it's like you can't control the outside world. You cannot control how you're going to be triggered. You cannot control how overwhelmed you are going to be. You cannot control the next soul. But you can control how strong you are and how you are going to be mentally and physically strong to respond to something like this. And that's usually the approach I take.
Wow, I find this very fascinating.
Thank you.
Because a lot of people also, as I hear you integrate obviously the whole body into your work as well as the mental part, but it's like a very holistic approach.
Yeah.
But one thing that people, I feel, try to not avoid but neglect a lot in their whole healing journey, however it's called, like in their way of, let's say, working through anxiety or getting themselves out of depression, they neglect the gut a lot. Is there something that you notice like that's wrong in the gut when you struggle with mental health?
It's so funny because the gut health, which is digestion in Chinese medicine, is so fundamental. We are the oldest medicine, to really. Chinese medicine is the oldest holistic medicine. I think our only competitor is probably Ayurveda, but we have very different approach. And each organ is associated with a particular emotion. So gut, spleen, not to be confused with the Western medicine spleen, by the way, it is associated with overthinking and anxiety. So often you will see people who are deeply anxious, they have digestive issues for sure. Most of the time they have bloating. Most of the time they don't feel great, after eating. And often there is a problem with appetite. And it's not so simple just like that. In some cases, when it gets worse, they will have irregular bowel movement. So, for example, and this is all interlinked, right? For example, like most Chinese medicine's approach to irritable bowel movement, it has everything to do with stress. How weak your digestion is, right? In the face of stress. So there is a relationship, we say, between the liver, which is responsible for processing negative emotions, to digestion. The liver works like a bully in class. It will pick the weakest child in class. That weakest child is often digestion. So when the digestion is so weak, the liver will pick on it. So you can see this in a nutshell is why whenever there is a lot of stress, digestion is the first thing that suffers. So in every single scenario, most chronically anxiety patient, you will see that they will have this scallop-shaped wavy edges around their tongue. And that's called spleen qi deficiency. And that is basically a sign that your digestion is already declining. So often, I would say 9.10 out of times, I will see that in a patient. So it's very much so like hand in hand that the anxiety goes with anxiety.
So you're diagnosing people also based on their tongue?
Yeah. So one of my most famous services is actually to read. So a patient usually don't tell me much about their symptoms at all. They would just send me a tongue picture and I will basically tell their life for them in a video.
I'm really afraid. So you could tell me based on my tongue?
Yeah.
What I would be struggling with?
Yes. And it is one of the powerful tools Chinese medicine has. I mean, when I examine a patient, it will take the tongue diagnosis. It will take 1 hour of consultation. Yeah. There are also like other tools I use, but I would say the tongue diagnosis is the most fascinating because Chinese medicine is so comprehensive. It's usually difficult for one to think that, where do I begin? What do you mean this medicine has been around for 3,000 years? You can treat everything, right? That sounds too good to be true. So tongue is easy as an entry point. Everyone has a tongue. I'm clearly not spying on you in your head. So how do I know your symptom if it were not actually because of this medicine? And so, yeah.
Wow. So if I'm sitting now, let's say at home, could I diagnose myself or say like based on a certain thing on my tongue, I probably struggle, let's say, with anxiety?
Yeah. So like, I think a tongue is not just, when I analyze a patient, it's not usually just, oh, you don't sleep well, right? Like you can, statistically speaking, you can even guess, but it's really, I will tell you all the problematic physical characteristics of the tongue. And based on that, I will tell you what that means in terms of symptoms. But that to the patient is also sometimes overwhelming because they just couldn't believe it. They're like, what is happening? They're in shock. But to me, is that enough to write someone a customized herbal formulation though? You still have to do your work of gathering the medical details and really getting into the in-depth of symptoms.
And then how long do people need to take?
It really depends. I mean, like, the youngest patient I have had thus far is 2.5. The oldest patient is 80. And it really depends on your age and severity. Usually the younger you are, the faster it is because it's unfair. children just heal so much faster,
Yeah.
especially if they don't have as much pharmaceutical treatment, beforehand. But even if the case is usually faster, unless it's something incredibly complex, which I have seen also. Long COVID is usually 3 to 5, depending on the severity, 3 to 5 rounds of herbal medicine, and then you're good to go.
What's one
But
round?
obviously, like if you have,
What's one round? How long does it take?
One round is usually a month and a half.
Okay.
Or 2. That is depending on the dosage. The total amount is the same. It's just I give dosage differently based on the age. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So when you're older, then you get a little bit different.
Yeah, if you're heavier, if you're taller and heavier, then you will obviously be on a different dosage from, let's say, a child who is 6.
Wow.
So everything is customized.
And what's the most, let's say, incredible healing you have witnessed in your work?
You mean most transformative result?
Yeah.
There were many, but I would say it was a 17 years old girl whose parents, she basically had long COVID, but parents didn't know. They only knew since COVID she started having like signs of endometriosis. She started having signs of deep anxiety. Hormonal imbalance is nowhere, like hormonal balance is nowhere to be found. Like everything was off. And then they did a bunch of tests on her, and she was told that she has this autoimmune condition, which the family has the gene. So the mom was very confused and very sad because she was very young. Like, how could this be, right? She will never be healed. I treated her, I believe, for 3 rounds only. She was fine. All symptoms completely disappeared and never came back. She's happily in college. Because the thing is, I think it's very, like, for someone to be told you're going to be like this for the rest of your life no, you're fine. This is huge. This is a huge transformation. There are many stories like that, but I think to me is also that I grew up in China in my father's clinic, and then I went to England for school. So to me, those two cultures were both very good in understanding nuance. I think the American culture, especially how Western medicine is practiced in general in this country, I don't think it's the same in Europe. It's very absolute. It's like either you're never going to be better, right? Take away your self-empowerment. You're never going to be better. You have long COVID or whatever. Like, this is going to be like this. You're going to be depressed for your life, or you have depression. You're going to be depressed for your life. And I think it's very much so like, oh, you have to be on this pill. If you're not on this pill, then you're never going to get better. It's a very different approach from that to Chinese medicine, because ultimately it's about me treating you, but it's me rebalancing you so you have the tools to overcome this, and then you're good to go. I mean, unless I have a patient who is absolutely impossibly crazy severe, I don't put anybody on Chinese medicine for life.
Wow. Because
you don't need to. I mean, even my post-cancer patient, she was 80 at the time. She's done after she's totally fine. She basically, because of surgery, lost all her capability of regulating her bowel movement. And after we worked together, and she's fine. So I basically stopped her. I said, that's it. You can just continue on with your life. I don't see the point of putting anybody on anything for life. That's not the goal of this medicine.
So you basically take it for a certain time period until the patient and you decide, okay, it's time to stop.
Yeah.
And how is that, for example, let's say with anxiety? Because anxiety is something that comes back.
Yeah, of course.
But is that also something that if they, let's say, take the medicine for, I don't know, let's say 5 rounds, that it then, I mean, anxiety can come back, but not to the severity, but that you don't experience it as such anymore, like you used to? Is that something?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think the approach is very different, right? Because the number of anxiety patients I have is anxiety is a symptom. The way Chinese medicine see it is anxiety is a symptom. It's not the root cause. So once I deal with the root cause, body is strong enough not to feel that. Now, is it possible you're triggered in some way, especially for people who have unresolved trauma issue, right? then it's a different scenario. But I give you one example. I always tell patients in the early days of treatment, especially if you have anxiety and you have deep trauma, depending on whether you have been on antidepressant for a long time or not, you're going to go from I am purposely isolating myself from the trauma to I'm now actually feeling my trauma. There will be a period when you become so in tune with your emotions that you almost think you're getting worse. Because you go from, I don't want to see you because that's the SSRI treatment. I close my door on my trauma. I close my door on my anxiety. I don't have it. You know you have it. It's just next door.
Yeah.
You can almost hear it in your ears. But you tell yourself that you don't. That's how SSRI works. For Chinese medicine is, I will make you strong enough that you will go open the door and you'll be like, I am really scared, but I'm going to have a conversation with you. So once you face it, you face it. That's it.
I find that incredible because that's part of also the trauma work, right? To make you strong enough. But I find this interesting that Chinese medicine can make you stronger. Is that also a nervous system way of working?
Because the interesting thing is like, fear, right? And anger, which are all part of this. If you experience trauma is this frustration, especially for things you experienced in childhood. You can't go back like, nobody's gonna say, I'm gonna resolve it for you. How do you get over that? I think oftentimes the biggest mistake is people say, I'm just going to step away from that. You cannot. Because body keeps score. Trauma keeps score. How does trauma impact one physically? It does it by instilling fear. And fear is the emotion associated with kidney health. And kidney health has everything to do with fertility, aging, growth, dementia, right? How does frustration, anger works? It's linked with liver, which has everything to do with PMS, the PMS you experience. It has everything to do with sharp pain you experience. It has everything to do with, blood circulation. So you cannot, and I always say this, it's almost like going on a battle. Facing something that happened a long time ago, you can't just go naked. You have to be prepared. You have to be prepared. It's almost like you need to get dressed. You need to have, but it's not you get a shield big enough to block you from what happened in the past, but you wear your armor and you show up and you're like, I'm ready for battle. But no one, even you think about past history, is going to go on a battle while being on a flu. You have to be strong enough to do that in the first place.
Oh, I like that one, the way you put it. That's incredible. But how, if in your work, does that look like? Let's say it's building resilience in the body.
Yep.
But does that mean then automatically, if I'm, for example, trying to, I live with that stored anger and that fear, I think those are the real responses also of people with unresolved trauma that leave you helpless, powerless, you suppress it. Is that then that automatically the body steps away and out of, let's say, survival mode and out of that stress, and through that it allows me to release it? Or how does it look like?
It is interesting because a lot of the, what you said, right? When one is trying to repress the anger, you have symptoms, don't you? There are physical symptoms, right? There are symptoms like you suddenly feel there's a rock sitting on your chest. You suddenly feel like you're clammy. You have clammy hands. You feel like you almost have this, you can hear your heart pounding in your ears. You get extremely thirsty in certain cases. Or in terms of anger, when some people who have a binge eating issue because they're actually angry, what happens? They will vomit. These are all physical symptoms.
Yeah.
And it's because what we call in Chinese medicine, the qi mechanism gets completely disturbed. When things are not supposed to go this way, it's going this way. So by treating the physical symptoms, you will relearn, your body will relearn. It's actually you doing the work. I always say to a patient, is you accepting the herbal formula and collaboratively, work on this. It will teach your body to rebalance, to relearn how to handle this.
That's
Because
incredible.
the biggest problem, I don't have any problem with this RI per se. I do think that why is it so difficult to get off it for a lot of people?
Yeah.
It's because it's a skill. I mean, that's why I think it's so amazing what you're doing is that you're teaching people the skill. Like, how do you handle this, right? If anybody can do it, they will just do it. I'll do it. Why do people need to learn? It is a skill.
Agreed, yeah.
And most importantly, you as the individual has to be, number one, be open to it. Number two, that's hard. That knocks over, 50% of the people don't want to face up to the reality. And then you have to learn the skill. And most importantly, you have to be prepared physically and mentally strong. And because these, if you think about how long China has existed as a country, how long Chinese medicine has been around, this is a lot of patients we have tested, So it's, so it works like that.
Wow, that's really incredible work.
Thank you.
Because I think people, and that's no judgment around it, it's also part of how the world works these days. We want to have the, let's say, quick fix where we don't put the effort in or, that own work.
Yeah.
And sometimes it means also being patient with our body and our mind in some ways. Is that something that you also integrate into your work next to the prescribing, let's say, is it formula?
Yeah. Herbal formula, yeah.
Herbal formula. Is there something else you provide as a support, or how does it work in Chinese medicine? Is it similar to not going to a normal doctor and you see them once a month, let's say?
I see my patients usually once every month or once every month and a half or every 2 months, depends on the dosage. And we always have a chat. This chat is me checking off every single symptom they have and ask them, has this improved? If it has, to what extent? So, for example, like my patient who is a professional athlete was suffering from depression and he was not responding to the medication. Started having a bunch of issues. By the end of the day, it was impacting his training. So it's impacting his career. And, I asked him about brain fog and I will say, like, he said, yeah, it has improved. I will be like, give me a rough percentage compared to before when you started. Because I'm an economist, I am really fixated on the quantifiable numbers. So I get very kind of precise in terms of the improvement. And based on their improvement, or God forbid, there are new symptoms, I will revise the herbal formula each time. Because you're an evolving individual, right? I think by the end of the day, the fundamental difference really lies in the fact that Chinese medicine really believe that you as a human can rebalance and therefore you can heal. I think that's the fundamental difference, right? In Western medicine, it's kind of like you have to do this intervention, you have a tumor and you must cut it, which I totally get. But what happens to the functionality, right? For example, if you have breast cancer, you cut everything. What happened to the functionality of that after? Does that mean if you no longer have your breast, there is nothing there? Like, how does one's functionality work or heal after a surgery? I don't think that's a question Western medicine necessarily think about.
But that's what you integrate into your work?
Yeah. Which is why I also have a lot of patients who are post-cancer.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes active cancer. Yeah.
Oh. Is there a certain approach with like people who are dealing with cancer that helps them, going a bit of extreme, let's say, heal the cancer? Or is it more supportive to the cancer treatment and the aftermath after the treatment in the Western medicine?
My personal approach to this is I prefer to treat people if the surgery was not successful or the surgery didn't achieve what it aimed to achieve. I think I have also like active cancer patients, because when everyone is going through chemo, your bodily function, your sleep, your eating, your anything is out of whack, right? Then so the approach is different, where if the surgery failed, for example, in the case of my post-colon cancer treatment patient, who the goal was to control the bowel movement, but the surgery failed. So she basically will have accidents like all the time, which completely wrecked her life, because she went from a really bubbly senior to she just had to stay at home because she's nervous about going anywhere. So the goal was basically to rebalance. I think her doctor basically, she's a patient in France, actually. Her doctor said, like, it's not possible for you to regain your control over bowel movement ever again. She's totally fine. She's going swimming.
Yeah?
Yeah, she has, but I discharged her. She's not even on active meds anymore.
How long did it take, the treatment?
To her, because of her age and the severity, it took a year. And I basically discharged her. I was like, I don't think you need to anymore. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I don't think you need to anymore. Where in the Western medicine view, you should never have regained your ability back.
So it's
that's
very
not
black
how
and
Chinese
white.
medicine see it.
It's very black and white, no gray.
It's very black and white.
Yeah.
I think especially in the surgery world, is pretty much like either this or not. But we are not robots. Humans, I think, even today in the world of physics or medicine, people will say, like, nothing is absolute. There will never be a practitioner, a responsible one, including me, who will say, I absolutely can fix you. No one ever. Because human organism is such a mysterious thing. We don't understand everything. And I think Chinese medicine always holds that positivity and respect for that. Rather than say, oh, you have a tumor on your breast, we'll just cut that. And then what happens? Often it comes back. And it makes perfect sense in Chinese medicine because most breast cancer patients have what we call liver qi and blood stagnation problem.
What is that?
And that means there are deep emotional issues, especially with perfectionism and also frustration that they never resolved in the first place. And if the internal environment hasn't changed, by simply removing this tumor doesn't change the internal environment, it's going to come back. Because in Chinese medicine, liver channel, if you have ever done acupuncture, actually go through the breast. So it makes perfect sense for us. And often, whenever I see a patient who is a breast cancer survivor, one has to completely change your outlook after the treatment. Otherwise, you will see, like, there is a reason why breast cancer is likely to come back to a lot of people. I think it's a lot of female cancers. It's the same, so it's not just, okay, let's remove this. We're going to be perfectly fine. No.
So you basically, so for how I understand this, the Chinese medicine is supporting the body to recover by itself?
Yeah.
To empower the body of like, hey, you can treat yourself.
Right. Because even in using the example of depression, right? I think the Western medicine approach is very much so you have depression, therefore you should be on probably large dosage of SSRI, depending on whether you have intrusive thoughts. That's not how Chinese medicine sees it at all. In fact, I have had younger patients who were put on SSRI for large dosage over a long period of time. In Chinese medicine, we say that once you're on SSRI or even pharmaceuticals for a long period of time, it really attacks your digestive function. So not only did she start having problems with digestion and also hormones, she started having issues controlling her bowels. Irregular bowel issues, which is actually very closely linked to having taken large dosage of SSRI since a very young age. So, everything is interlinked in a way. There is no, I take this, it will stop my depression, and then everything will be beautiful again. I don't even think if SSRI actually manages to control your depression, one can say that. So, yeah, there is no free meal.
But as an example, if let's say I've taken antidepressants for years and an adult and I want to get off, because a lot of people are these days on it and they have side effects, they struggle, it's affecting you on so many levels, sometimes your libido, that's the weight, it's a lot of things. You have maybe anxiety. It's like a lot of times I hear also doctors saying, well, what's worse, do you want to have anxiety or depression, and which one medication, which one are we treating? So it's sometimes either they sit with depression or they sit with anxiety symptoms, and let's say they want to get off. Is there a way that you would support it, and then they never have to get on it, but they also don't deal with, let's say, the anxiety, the depression, or mental health struggles they're dealing with?
Well, so I have had patients who I basically worked with getting off medication. He was on it for 10 years at the time, and he tried to do it a few times himself. It was this usually, in my experience, only happens to people who have been on it for longer than like 5 years. They're kind of on that, like, very little dosage. Like he was on, I think, 25 milligram a day for the longest time. And he tried to get off it. Every single time he get off it, he was having like heart palpitation. He couldn't sleep. He feel like his head is spinning. So he was really horrified of trying it again. But he really had to, and he really wanted to. So we worked together, and my approach is actually more conservative than a lot of psychologists, I was told, because his own psychologist was saying that he should get off it in 3 weeks. So drop it from like 25 to 10. And then like, that's the practice, I understand. But it didn't work for him twice before. So we were not going to try that. So I basically helped him get off it 5 milligram at a time. And for the last 5 milligram, we worked a few months in really strengthening his heart and digestive function. So he got off it. He never went back to it.
Oh, that's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is totally possible. I mean, obviously, we were talking about anxiety and depression. I think in terms of physical symptoms, depression to me, usually clinically, is a lot worse in terms of physical symptoms compared to anxiety. But if you start having things like panic attacks, which actually can be very common to have once you have deep digestive issues or even crazy dreams, then that's also something we handle very often. It's when it gets to the extremes.
And then you see the anxiety or panic attacks not showing up anymore?
Not showing up anymore. The important thing, obviously, and I always tell patients this, right? One of my patients who has SIBO, which is an autoimmune condition for like small intestine bacterial overgrowths. And I told her, and I said, like, it's going, she's like, really, all these are going to go away? And she had like panic attacks and super anxiety and all these other issues. I was like, yeah, but I said, remember, improvement or even symptoms not being there is not the same as you're healed.
Oh, that's an interesting message.
So you have to stay consistent for a period of time when you and I both agree, and I think this is good to go, and it's good to go. Because otherwise you could have done it prematurely. The body, especially when you have been on antidepressant or other things for a long time, have learned not to handling things, have learned not to handle emotions, have learned, it's almost like a child or like, okay, it's time to learn how to walk. And the kid is like, no, I had my walker. I'm just going to hold on this walker forever until I'm 18 years old. When nobody ever says, oh, just throw away the stick. You can go. What's going to happen? He's going to fall. Then what's going to happen? He's afraid of trying again.
That's true.
So you have to give a natural substitute that is still him doing it, but he is getting stronger. It cannot be just, okay, years of trauma and years of anxiety is just going to overnight. You're just going to like deal with this, which is why like I'm always against people who cold quit their SSRIs. Cold quitting is not a good idea. I'm sure you also don't recommend it in your profession. And I remember one of my patients and his psychologist is like, but it's only 25 milligram. I'm like, no. I'm like, he has been on it for 10 years, right? And he did it twice already. This is not, we gotta have to do it slowly. So yeah, because I don't want to have the patient who had the trauma of having failed in something and then feel like I'm failing it again.
That's reinforcing
we're confident.
Yeah,
exactly. You don't ever want to reinforce the trauma. So yeah,
I find this really fascinating because and I just I want to visualize it a little bit more for myself, but maybe also for you out there. If I really struggle, and let's name it the depression, and I'm very much like not really feeling my feelings, how does it look like when I start taking the formula? Do I feel then without the intention, because the medicine helps me to, let's say, make my organs stronger, or it balances things out? Do I then suddenly experience, let's say, the sadness or the anger?
So that's a really good question. But then also, like, I'll give you examples of two of my patients. I have more patients who have depression, but these two I think are quite interesting examples. There is a fundamental difference between one depression patient or just, patient and patients. I think no matter whether you're anxious or you're depressed, you still have to have a slimmer of hope, of openness.
True.
Of thinking that I'm going to try something new and I'm going to stick to it until I see her next time, so I know what has changed, what has not. For depression patients in particular, you have two types. You have one type who is really depressed. They're equally depressed, let's say, right? But then you have one type who will stick it to the follow-up time with me. They are rewarded with a change of things. Their outlook is different. In a few batches, they might even get chirpier. And then you have another type. I know this other type. You will not see them at follow-up because they gave up. They're like, oh, that's usually the case when they want things to switch like that. It doesn't. Chinese medicine is natural. For some people, yeah. Is it possible you start feeling it after 2 days? Yeah. But most of the time, it takes 2 or 4 weeks. We have to think how long you have had the depression, right? So this is why I'm always saying the patient's active participation of at least trusting the process and being open is fundamental. I'm sure it's similar in psychology,
exactly.
right?
I was about to say, it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
If you don't have, and that's where hope is actually very important, of like, I'm giving this a chance.
Yeah.
And giving it a try. And it goes a little bit hand in hand with also your own willpower. And I think this is the tough news whenever you're dealing with any form of healing, that your participation is a key element in it.
Yeah. It's almost like dating.
Oh, I like that one.
When you're like dating someone, right? You want to be, it's almost like checking a product. that comes my inappropriate analogy. You want to be fully into it. You want to be fully into your partner, so right? Go on a vacation, like go do crazy things. So the more data you can gather, the more involved you are, the more you realize and knowing better this is worth a shot. If you are constantly weighing your options, if you're constantly squirmish about like how far you want to take this, you're never going to get much out of that relationship. Then what happens if it fizzles out? Either they dump you or you dump them. And then if other people ask you, what do you think about this person? You're like, But it's not because you truly knew, but it's because you never give it a go.
Oh. Actually, I have a question. It's very random, but do people with heart pain come to you after breakup? And is Chinese medicine also helpful here?
A breakup?
Yeah.
I have patients with a lot of grief. I always have patients with a lot of grief. And this is interesting because grief is the other emotion. Grief is the emotion to the lung, which is then related to immunity. And in my world, specifically among my patients, most patients who have long COVID has a lot of that.
Oh, really?
And I would say 85% of my patients from Europe, especially the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, like the colder countries, Scandinavia, have long COVID. Usually it's because of long COVID they see me, or psoriasis. But long COVID in a way that, because grief, all the loss, really experience the loss of something, right? Sometimes we'll say, I wake up gasping for air. Sometimes you'll hear people who has so much grief, like when they cry, they're like they do this, right? That's because grief is the emotion to the lung in Chinese medicine. It weakens you completely because it attacks the lung, and lung is the organ that really protects the most outer layer of your immunity, your defense. So for people who have long COVID, you will notice like they're never happy. They're usually looking like they just got through a breakup. They're still sobbing. They don't know why they're crying. And because the situation is ridiculous, right? But also because there is that sadness that really came from a much weakened immunity.
So it builds also the immunity in your body again.
Yes, especially if someone who has long COVID, like it is fundamental not only to get rid of all their symptoms and for them to heal. I have to basically fix whatever that's broken, so you're not going to have the scenario again. So yeah, but it's very much so linked with emotion. Like one of my patients who I discharged, I believe last week, who had long COVID, she's like a fundamentally much happier person. She did not have anxiety anymore. She lost weight. She's happily eating. She's no longer complaining about her life. It's just like...
So it helps also with cortisol levels.
Yes, every time. So I always check mental health. In my consultation, I check it. In my follow-up, I check it. In your intake form, I put it. It's very important to me because it's fundamental in Chinese medicine that I know how your mind is, because the mind is connected to the physical health.
And how is it with addiction, for example? If an addiction can shift, right? I mean,
I love addiction. Addiction is a really interesting thing. I think what a lot of patients who have addiction have in common is a very, very, very deficient digestion.
Oh,
because you need something to fill it, right?
Yeah.
Would you guys not say that in psychology? Exactly. Like, you find addiction because you need something to fill it. Then the question is, why do you feel empty in the first place? There is a problem with the digestion.
Oh.
It has everything to do with metabolism. It has everything to do... If you think about like a person with addiction, you're the expert for that. Depending on what you're addicted to, there is always a void. And most of the time, I find my patients who have addictions to be highly intelligent individuals.
Yeah, I can agree. Yeah.
So, but the difference is they cannot tolerate boredom.
Yeah.
And they also feel that there is just something that makes them feel like not settled in the gut. Not settled.
True.
Right. So then why does weed calm a lot of these people, right, in the early days, before something hotter hits you? Is because weed numbs the digestive system. So it no longer goes like air. It kind of just goes to sleep. So, but you mistake that as you're feeling relaxed.
Oh, but that's the same with the brain. You can relax, but you can never like go into deep sleep, for example.
Exactly.
So it blocks certain parts.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're not, again, it is not the same as SRI, but like, you know, the purpose, the functionality is similar. That is, you numb the trigger. This is you kind of numb how your gut or how your body respond. You're not facing it.
So working, let's say, on creating a formula, and I know it's individual, but for someone who's dealing with an addiction, let's say I'm going into extreme cocaine addiction or something like this, it's related to the gut. And if we treat it and, let's say, strengthen it and build the gut sort of bacteria?
No, it is to strengthen the digestion to be able to functional, to allow you to have a normal appetite. Because most of addicts don't have a normal appetite, right? No normal appetite, no normal food intake, irregular bowel movement. Chinese medicine believes that after we're born, especially when we're already adults, digestion really generates the energy you need and the blood, which is like what runs in your veins, right? Which is two essence, whatever, you know, essential ingredients, so to speak, for life. If your digestion is heavily compromised, you're not eating because you're strangely not hungry, right? As an addict, even when you do, you binge eat, you put rubbish things in your body, then your body, who is not used to even taking this much of calorie at a given time, is unable to function. It freezes. It's unable to extract the nutrients, therefore then is unable to produce enough of energy and blood, so you're constantly tired. Then you need something quick to get you out of the tiredness. What do? You get the next, you know, thing. And most of the drug addicts, at least clinically I see, have a very strong craving for sweets, even as a young child, because sweet is the flavor to digestion. Pathologically, the worse the stronger the sugar craving is, the less your body is able to process that sugar. But then that means the worse their digestion is. So this is why you will hear little kids before the age of 6 in particular, they're always like, I want sweets, I want ice cream. Well, that's because they're still growing into that. When they get enough of nutrients, they will not ask for it all the time. But I have seen in clinical setting a lot of kids who have ADHD are crazy about their candy intake.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they always have digestive issues. Right? Obviously, ADHD is different from addicts, but I think for addicts in particular is that gnawing sensation, so to speak, that's in the gut, that since they're throughout childhood is so strong that it tips things off completely off balance. And I will say on that note, one of not the hardest to treat, but you ask me how long I treat patients, and I usually say whenever I have a bulimia patient, I would say that usually takes kind of longer.
Would you say the gut is the second brain?
Yes, very much so. If anything, in Chinese medicine, there are two things. It's not only the digestion is the brain, it's the heart. Because in Chinese medicine, like heart does a lot of brain activities. So whenever we say in Mandarin, right, we say like pay attention, we say 用心, use your heart. We don't say use your brain.
Oh, I like that.
We say use your heart. And where does the heart get nourishment from? Your digestion. So this is why, like, if you think about someone who's stressed out, right? Usually what's the first symptom? They don't eat as well. They don't digest as well. Some people who have IBS is usually start, the IBS symptoms usually start happening once they experience a sudden stress at work or sudden stress, they just keep running to the bathroom. That's the early sign is always stress and then digestion and then something else, because those two are the easiest to get attacked.
Oh, that's amazing. I always ask everyone who comes on my show, but it's something maybe we can even relate to your own work and to your own life. If you could travel back in time and speak to your own self, your past self, can be any age, but what would you advise yourself?
Oh, God. I think when I was 15 years old, I still think that's the hardest time in my life. I would tell myself to give yourself a chance and wait for your own abilities to manifest rather than going crazy, over analyzing, thinking what you're going to do with your life because you're not perfect yet.
That's a beautiful message.
Yeah. This is why I love seeing my children patients. I never advertise I see children patients, but I do. Especially, I think it's a gift and privilege to treat children because they just get well so much faster. And they share their dreams with you. And I think it's so beautiful. Because it's such a fragile age, like 15 to 13 to 17, like in today's world. We need to be, I think the world is not kind, especially to them. The world is definitely not patient. Right after you turn 18, you're like, what are you going to do with your life? Right? You as a parents don't even know what you're doing with your life. So why do you ask your kids? I think we all need to, if I had one thing to say to myself back in the days, is just I know you're really scared. You think you're not good enough. You think you don't have it to do whatever you think you're going to do, but just keep at it and wait. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
That's like a message of don't put the foot on the gas pedal. No pressure.
Yeah. Because in Chinese medicine, the worst thing you can do is to drive a car, aka your house, when the tank is half full. You don't even know when you're going to fill the gas next, and you keep going and you don't know where you're going. And that's really the worst thing. But then when you are a teenager, there's no rush.
That's true.
Because you're not tank half full.
I like that one.
Yeah.
We have to really remember that. Thank you so much. I'm very fascinated by the work that you do. I think this is so helpful. And for everyone who's struggling out there, I'm sure they're curious, where can they find you?
Oh, they can follow me at KUN House, Kun House. We're very much so on Instagram.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And you work globally with everyone?
Yes. So I see patients virtually. So I actually have a lot of patients from Europe.
How can I picture this? You have like at home a whole like shelf full of of little bottles? Or
No, everything. Anybody who wants to see me from Europe, I have to do the same thing. We will do the virtual consultation, and I will write your report, customized dietary advice and things like that. But I will need to send your prescription to be made in our Britain facility.
Oh,
I also have
that's
one
perfect.
in the Netherlands. So, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, please make sure that you check out her website and also her Instagram. I'm so grateful that you were here and shed a light on Chinese medicine, which is something that not many people know about, not many people talk about. But I find this could be, if this resonated with you and you feel stuck and you feel helpless and you feel like you have physical symptoms and you would like to have support, maybe this is your answer. Go and check it out. Thank you so much for being on my podcast.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What an interesting episode today about Chinese medicine. If this resonates with you and you would like to know more, please check in the captions below and in the show notes where you can find everything about Chinese medicine. Please make sure to stay safe and take good care of yourself. Thank you for watching this episode. Please also subscribe to my show to support me traveling the world to find the most interesting experts around the globe to help you on your healing journey. Take good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next episode, wherever that's gonna be.